Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're so thrilled to be here with our friends from the Brooklyn Public Library on our first Borrow, Read, Repeat live Brooklyn BookMatch book club presentation. We're really looking forward to sharing with you some great books that you can borrow from your library, some amazing summer reading resources, all sorts of fun tidbits. I'll just mention that we do have someone standing by to answer your Q&A questions. So feel free to bring up the Q&A sidebar and just jot down your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them today. I'll introduce myself. My name is Jen Childs. I work at Penguin Random House with the Library Marketing Department, where we work on Borrow, Read, Repeat, which is a service for library patrons. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves as well.
Hi, I'm Kelly Coyle-Crivelli. We're very excited to do this joint program with you guys today. I hope you're all doing well, and we love talking about books, so any excuse to do it is fine with us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Carbone. I'm a young adult librarian at the Central Library in Brooklyn. So when we are open, you may see me around the youth wing. And I'm really excited to be joining Borrow, Read, Repeat today to share some recommendations.
Okay, and I just saw Jess. Are you there, Jess? Oh, there she is.
Hi, yeah. Hang on. Deny. Okay.
Would not be WebEx without some sort of technical issue.
My name's Jess. I'm a children's librarian at Brooklyn Public Library. I usually work at France.
Well, we're having a little bit of problem hearing you, Jess, but we'll...
I'm sorry?
Oh, there you are. Okay, you're going in a little bit in and out, but it's okay.
I'm having some...
Okay.
Great.
All right. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah. You're fine. You're okay. Just going a little bit in and out, but I think we've got you.
Great. I'll just mention the books that we're going to discuss today are, of course, all available. Can you hear us? Well, the books we're going to talk about today, you're, of course, able to borrow from the Brooklyn Public Library. We have a format key, so you'll see that there are print, of course, which is you're not able to get at the moment, but most of the things that we'll be discussing are available in ebook, downloadable audio, etc. So look at the key to see what formats the books are available in.
All right, Jess, do you want to try do you want us to see if we can hear you one more time? All right, hopefully she will come back to us. We apologize for the technical issues that we're having. We'll continue, and then we'll try to get her back. When she comes back, we'll let you guys know. Great. Okay. All right. Oh, there you are.
Okay. Am I
You're
back?
You're back. Okay.
Awesome. Great. I switched over my Wi-Fi, so it shouldn't be a problem now. So I'm sorry, just catching up.
No, fine.
We're doing some.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Jess, because you broke up a lot. So take a second and reintroduce yourself.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm a librarian at the McKinley Park Library at Brooklyn Public Library. And I also work on that team, so I'm excited to get a chance to talk about books today. Haven't been able to do enough of that recently.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
And also, if you haven't heard of BookMatch, it's a special service the Brooklyn Public Library offers where people can fill out a form on our website at bklynlibrary.org/bookmatch. And a librarian will get back to you to provide a personalized list of book recommendations, right now an ebook or e-audiobook, within 1 to 2 weeks. So you tell us what you're interested in and what you enjoy or don't like reading, and then we will be happy to create a list for you with reservable items in our catalog. Also, even if you're not in Brooklyn or don't have a Brooklyn Public Library card, you are always welcome to request a book list from BookMatch. We love having people from all over requesting recommendations.
And Jess, do you want to talk about the summer reading program?
Yeah, so this year's summer reading theme is called Imagine Your Story. You can see the lovely artwork on the screen there. I think it's really fun this year. So we're doing it all virtual this year. So quarantine isn't stopping our summer reading program. You can check us out on on the website, which is there in the PowerPoint as well. There's a ton of information, activities you can do at home, all sorts of stuff for you to do. There are book lists for kids from birth all the way up through teenagers, lots of stuff going on there. A lot of really great books. That list is curated by Brooklyn Public Library and New York Public Librarians. So that's awesome. And then we're partnering with Beanstack this year, which has weekly challenges for kids aged about 5 to 12, where they can get badges for every activity. There's a different activity every week, and you can check that out. And if you go to this Brooklyn Public this library website with summer reading, there are also resources for teachers. So if you're a teacher or an educator looking for ways to either engage people or kids during the summer, or activities you can do next school year, there are a bunch of resources there as well.
And just a reminder to everybody that's on the call, we will send out an email after this with the slides, so you don't have to scribble down all these URLs. We're going to send this all to you in an email after.
Great, and then I mentioned earlier Borrow, Read, Repeat, which is our blog where we highlight great reading recommendations for books that you can borrow from your library. We have all sorts of fun roundups like new audiobooks, books to take out if you're missing the theater, Pride Month reads, hints for Father's Day. I'm sure there are people out there who still haven't figured out what to do yet. So lots of fun kind of reading roundups if you don't know what to read next. We also have an e-newsletter that goes out twice a month. You're welcome to sign up at the URL on the screen. And again, it just gives you kind of a heads up of new books coming that you may be interested in.
We also are very big audiobook fans in our department and in our company. And I know that people that use the library love checking out audiobooks from your catalog. So we wanted to let you know about a couple of audiobook resources we have. We have an app called Volumes where you can download the latest audiobooks and bookish podcasts. We have AudioFile Sync, which is audiobooks for teens. So a lot of reading recommendations there for your teen audiences. And we also have this really fun podcast called This is the Author, where you get a behind-the-scenes look, either from the author or the narrator. So it's just a really fun podcast about the backstory of the audiobook itself as well as the book. So these are all fun resources for audiobook fans like myself. I'm hugely an audiobook fan. And some other resources that we want you to know about are just a couple of things. And again, this will all be in the PowerPoint after, but our First Book Club is really fun if you wanted to sign up for that. What happens is for 5 days, you will get a little snippet of a book each day. By the end of the week, you'll have a chapter or two of the book. And at the end, you can decide if you want to purchase the book. if you want to continue reading, it's perfect for somebody to dip into a genre that they might not normally read. It's also perfect for Reader's Advisory for librarians. So we encourage you to sign up for our First Look Book Club. We also do some really fun giveaways in there. And it's really just a nice community of books and readers. Our Read 20 and 20 reminds me of what you were just talking about, Jessica, is a reading challenge for 2020. You know, maybe your reading tastes are always the same, but maybe this year you wanted to challenge yourself and dip into some different genres. So if you go to our tiny URL there, you'll see a challenge where you can read 20 different books in all different genres, like diverse voices, female voices, debut fiction, classics. There's a graphic novel one. And it's fun because you can print it out and you can check the boxes as you read them. So you can really challenge yourself to read more in 2020. And then Issue is a page, Issue is a great site where we have all of our downloadables. So we have book club brochures, excerpt samplers, Spanish language resources, and more. Our book club kits are really fun there. Anything that you might want to download, we have there. So we encourage you to visit our Issue page as well. All right, now on to the books, as we say.
Great. So with everything that's going on in the world right now, we wanted to make sure to highlight some books for the moment for people who are looking to educate themselves more relating to the issues. So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma Oluo is a great title where the author offers an approachable primer on how to open conversations about racism and race as they relate to several different areas, while also considering intersectionality and privilege. And this one is especially helpful for white readers who are trying to educate themselves on these issues and also how to be a better ally and support for their friends and colleagues who are not white and suffer from these issues all the time. Another important thing to know is that this title is always available from Brooklyn Public Library as an audiobook, so you can go and download that right now. No need to put a hold on it. Sick by Tressie McMillan Cottom is also always available as an ebook from the library. And in fiction, we talk a lot about books that act as windows or mirrors, where they either show a character's experience that's different from our own or reflect something back to us. Depending on your life experience, this book is both, and it's a really witty essay collection that explores themes of race, classism, and the cost of beauty, among other areas, including some really smart observations on all of those things.
Yeah, and then I wanted to talk about two books of poetry, actually. You know, it's great that we're having these conversations, and a lot of people are engaging seriously about with nonfiction on anti-racism work, and that's awesome. But I also wanted to take a moment to highlight poetry and art as resistance work and as a way to learn and to see. You know, it can be difficult to engage with nonfiction all the time, but there's also art can bring a really beautiful other side to people's lived experiences and the way that they're processing it and talking about it and sharing that with the rest of us. So, you know, there are a lot of lists that are heavy on nonfiction right now, but I wanted to talk a little bit about specifically anti-racist work that we can do in reading art. So I picked There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce by Morgan Parker, which is a tribute to Black womanhood in all of its varied forms. I can't say it any better than the first sentence of the copy here, so I'm just going to read this real quick. It says, "The only thing more beautiful than Beyonce is God. And God is a Black woman sipping rosé and drawing a lavender bath, texting her mom, belly laughing in the therapist's office, feeling unloved, being on display, and daring to survive." Highly recommend this book of poetry. It's incredibly powerful and feminist and amazing. And then the other book of poetry that I selected was Citizen, an American Lyric, which is actually a single book-length poem that brings in multimedia text and visual imagery interwoven with poetry and prose. And it confronts the effects of racism in various ways, but with a special focus on microaggressions. And again, incredibly powerful, and I highly recommend that one as well. That's by Claudia Rankine.
And then I'm going to talk about today American Poison. This is by a New York Times veteran, also a Brooklyn author. It shows how racial animus has stunted the development of nearly every institution crucial for a healthy society, including organized labor, public education, and the social safety net. The consequences are profound, Porter argues, and are only growing graver with time. The author rages through history and across America, from FDR's New Deal through Bill Clinton's welfare reform to Donald Trump's retrograde and divisive policies. Here, Porter pieces together how racial hostility has blocked American social cohesion at every turn, producing a nation that fails not only its Black and brown citizens, but white Americans as well. NPR said about this book, American Poison is a devastating, brutally honest, wonderfully researched read. It is also necessary and incredibly timely, from its discussion about how racism affects everything to its invitation to African Americans and Hispanics to unite and battle it together. Porter has crafted a narrative that ultimately becomes a statement. What we've done so far is wrong. It's time to change it. If you go to the penguinrandomhouse.com and search for American Poison, you'll find a print and audio excerpts so you can preview the book.
I wanted to talk to you today about 5 Days, The Fiery Reckoning of an American City by Wes Moore. This is a Publishers Weekly called this a illuminating portrait of Baltimore in the aftermath of the 2015 death of Freddie Gray. Readers will be enthralled by this propulsive account. This is a very timely book, obviously, for so many reasons. It's a kaleidoscope account of 5 days in the life of a city on the edge, told through 8 characters on the front lines of the uprising that overtook Baltimore and riveted the world. Moore, along with journalist Erica Green, tells the story of Baltimore uprising both through his own observations and through the eyes of other Baltimoreans. Party, a conflicted Black captain of the Baltimore Police Department; Jenny, a young white public defender who's drawn into the violent center of the uprising herself; Tawanda, a young Black woman who'd spent a lonely year protesting the killing of her own brother by police; and John Angelos, one of the city's, a scion of one of the most powerful families in the city, and executive vice president of the Baltimore Orioles, who had to make choices of conscience he'd never before confronted. Each shifting point of view contributes to an engrossing account of one of the most consequential moments in our recent history, which is also an essential observation about the deeper causes of the violence and the small seeds of hope planted in its aftermath. Many of you know Wes Moore. He's a Rhodes Scholar. He's a best-selling author. He's a decorated combat veteran, former White House fellow, and CEO of Robin Hood, one of the largest anti-poverty nonprofits in the nation. While attending Gray's funeral, he saw every stratum of the city coming together: grieving mothers, members of the city's wealthy elite, activists, and the long-suffering citizens of Baltimore, all looking to one another for comfort. But also he was looking for answers, and he knew that the people in Baltimore were looking for answers. He knew that when they left the church, these factions would spread out to their own corners, but that the answers they were all looking for could only be found in the city as a whole. This is a timely, beautiful book. I'm sure some of you have been able to hear him, Wes Moore, speak at some of the ALA conferences, and he is just a very powerful writer and a very riveting speaker. All right.
And also relating to these topics, we have some book lists on our website. Again, these are accessible to anyone, no library card required, but we have some different titles available for anyone interested in learning more about Black Lives Matter movement and also working on their own anti-racist education and finding ways to move forward. Several of the titles are always available in the catalog, which means that while you're waiting for titles with long hold queues, there will be other options to check out. And we also have lists for all ages, including children and teens, as well as reading for adults. Since we talked about summer reading and our theme, Imagine Your Story at the library, we thought it would be fun today to also highlight some titles for adults who want to do summer reading while their kids are participating in our challenge and working through our book list. I will admit that my first title, A Beginning at the End by Mike Chen, is a little on the nose right now. In the book, it starts after a global pandemic has changed the societal landscape and devastated the population. In the wake of what people are calling the end of the world, while many people are waiting for life to return to the normal we had before, 4 characters in this story are trying to move forward as best they can. There's Moira, who is a former pop star and used the outbreak as a chance to move away from her controlling father and to start a new life for herself. At least she thought she did until her father announces a public campaign searching for her. Krista offers options for people who are unwilling or unable to go outside themselves planning events. But it turns out in this new world, not many people are ready to plan weddings or parties, and she's not sure where that is going to leave her. And then there's Rob, who survived the outbreak even though his wife didn't. All he wants to do is make sure that he can bring up his daughter Sunny as best he can right now, but new government regulations are threatening to tear them apart. In a world waiting to return to a normal that might never come, these 4 people will need each other more than anything if they want to survive. And yes, the outbreak is very similar to what we have been experiencing with the current pandemic. So your mileage may vary on reading it. I personally found it really calming to be able to see a way to move past this while also seeing parallels to our day-to-day. And then the other book I want to talk about is The Girls at the Kingfisher Club. Now that we're in 2020, a lot of people are thinking about parallels to the 1920s. I don't think any of us realized how similar it would be with dealing with the coronavirus instead of the flu pandemic from 1918. So the parallels just keep stacking up. In this version, we see a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses set in 1920s New York. In the story, Jo, the oldest, always makes sure that all of her sisters make it out every night to go dancing, and she makes sure they all make it back before their father notices they're gone. It isn't a good life or an easy one, but all of them think that they can survive it until something better comes along. That is, until their father announces his plans to start marrying the sisters off one by one. Jo always feared they'd have to escape their father's townhouse, but she didn't realize they'd do so separated with no resources and no way to find each other again. Jo has spent years setting things aside to take care of her sisters. What she still has to figure out is how to make a life for herself as she tries to find them again in this story.
That sounds really good.
It does. That one.
I'm just putting it on mine.
I'm glad to hear it. It's a good one.
So this next book that I'm going to talk about, I could not be more excited to talk about it. I talk about it at every chance that I get, and that is The Starless Sea. I love this book so much. So, it goes on every list. I'm sure Emma's tired of hearing me talk about it.
She does talk about it all the time.
So The Starless Sea, we follow our hero, Zachary Ezra Rollins, as he is a grad student, and he's studying gaming theory, and he goes to the library during winter break, and he finds a book. There's no title, there's no author, no identifying information, but he picks it up, and he starts to read it, and he realizes that it is telling a story of something that happened to him in his childhood that he's never told anybody. But yet it's recounted perfectly in this book. And we follow him as he goes on a quest to kind of figure out what is going on, what's happening here, how somebody would know about this. Along the way, he meets a woman named Mirabelle, who is maybe the king of the wild things, and a man named Dorian, and he follows both of them into an underground library, society, mystery, begins to put it together. It is just a stunning, complex book. It is about the choices we make and what happens when we want to change them, which is why I thought it fits so perfectly with this Imagine Your Story, making one choice as a child and then wanting to change it as an adult and maybe getting that opportunity to. It's about the way that stories affect our life. Erin Morgenstern has said that when she started writing this, she thought she was writing a book about books, but actually she was writing a book about stories. And I think that that's just so compelling and such a beautiful way to look at it. There are fairy tales woven in. It gets incredibly strange. It's incredibly atmospheric. I love this book. I've read it several times already. In fact, I've taken to saying that I've never actually finished it because I just kind of keep diving back in. Anybody who read Morgenstern's earlier book, The Night Circus, will certainly love this. I love Night Circus deeply as well, but this feels like just a whole other level of writing and of fairy tales woven in through this book. So that's The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern.
You did it's a very hard book to describe, and you did a great job. It really is. And you're right. You feel like, I loved it too, and you feel like you're literally lost inside of a fairy tale. And you know what I thought was pretty cool? It's like, I was talking to somebody about it one day, and it is hard to describe. And I said, it's probably how people that first described Alice's Adventures in Wonderland felt. Like, how do you describe that book? And I feel like this is how The Starless Sea is. It's like you're describing something that was written hundreds of years ago or something. You did a great job. It's a hard one to describe, but it's great.
Yeah, it is, because like it's really easy to dive into all of the complexities, and it's like, okay, no, I just need to trim that back. Because it just the way that it evolves is so complicated. So, I hope I sold at least one person on that book, because anytime I can get somebody else to read it, I feel like I'm winning. But then the other book that I chose to talk about today, again, might be hitting a little close to home. But I think that it's worth the read. This is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin, who actually is a Brooklyn writer. She lives here in Brooklyn. And in The City We Became, New York City is waking up. When cities reach a certain point, they wake up, they become alive. It's happened to other cities, and it's finally happening to New York. And part of what happens is that there is a people who are battling the forces that want to keep it from waking up. And in fact, New York City has 6 avatars, one for the city as a whole and one for each of the boroughs. And those 5 avatars have suddenly been, they're people who live in the city who kind of personify the traits of each borough, and all of a sudden they're imbued with all of this knowledge of how they're trying to rip the city apart at the seams. Jemisin does, and then they have to come together and try to figure out how to battle these forces. And Jemisin just does a beautiful job of capturing the essence of each borough and really distilling it into a person, but yet making these characters feel so alive, so unique. She, I think she's the best author right now in science fiction, fantasy. Every book of hers just blows my mind wide open, and this one is no exception. So it's tough. Of started reading it. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody just said in the comments my sound's breaking up. I hope it's. Are you having trouble hearing me?
A little.
You're in and out, but yeah, now you're good.
Okay. Hopefully it stays. Okay. Where was I with it? Oh, so I started reading this at the beginning of quarantine, and it was tough because it's about the city kind of going out and fighting evil, and we were all locked in our homes and unable to go out and do that. But as it's moved on, it's kind of become, for me at least, this beautiful kind of cathartic idea of what the city and the people in the city can do to really fight evil and to really make change. So do with that what you will, but I loved this book. It's the beginning, so read it and join me in waiting for the next one.
Those were great book talks. I think I just got both of those on my list. Or the girls at Kingfisher Club and this one, Starless Sea, I already read, but to read it a couple of times, that's a good commitment. I might need to read it again. The next one I'm going to talk about is Gods of Jade and Shadow. This is a really fun one to talk about. It's about a Mayan god of death that sends a young woman on a harrowing, life-changing journey in a dark, one-of-a-kind fairy tale inspired by Mexican folklore. And it's also set during the Jazz Age, which I love. The Jazz Age is in full swing, but Cassiopeia Tun is too busy cleaning floors of her wealthy grandfather's house to listen to any fast tunes. Nevertheless, she dreams of a life far from her dusty small town in southern Mexico, a life she can call her own. Yet this new life seems as distant as the stars, until the day she finds a curious wooden box in her grandfather's room. She opens it and accidentally frees the spirit of the Mayan god of death, who requests her help in recovering his throne from his treacherous brother. Failure will mean Cassiopeia's demise, but success could make all of her dreams come true. In the company of the strangely alluring god and armed with her wits, Cassiopeia begins an adventure that will take her on a cross-country odyssey from the jungles of the Yucatan to the bright lights of Mexico City, and, of course, into the deep darkness of the Mayan underworld. NPR calls this a dark, dazzling fairy tale, a whirlwind tour of the 1920s, Mexico vivid with jazz, the memories of revolution and gods, demons, and magic. And Library Journal said in their starred review, snappy dialogue, stellar world building, lyrical prose, and a slow burn romance make it a standout. Talk about a place with a great atmosphere. I can't wait to read this one.
I'm so excited for this one.
Yeah.
This was actually one of the last library books I took out in physical copy before we closed. So I still have my library copy here.
Oh, nice.
I know we were very happy. We had, my kids had taken out so many library books, so we were plenty stocked up for the quarantine, so it was good. Now I'm going to talk about Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. This was a finalist for the 2019 National Book Award. It's got a great handle. This novel has been called an African Game of Thrones. Marlon James is the Man Booker Prize-winning author of A Brief History of Seven Killings, and here in this stunning first novel in his Dark Star trilogy, so again, more books that you can wait for, myth, fantasy, and history come together to explore what happens when a mercenary is hired to find a missing child. Tracker is known far and wide for his skills as a hunter. He has a nose, people say. He's engaged to track down a mysterious boy who disappeared 3 years earlier, but he breaks his own rules of always working alone when he finds himself part of a group that comes together to search for the boy. As Tracker follows the boy's scent from one ancient city to another into dense forests across deep rivers, he and the band are set upon by creatures intent on destroying them. As he struggles to survive, Tracker starts to wonder, who really is this boy? Why has he been missing for so long? Why do so many people want to keep Tracker from finding him? And perhaps the most important question of all, who's telling the truth and who's lying? Michiko Kakutani from the New York Times called this gripping and action-packed, the literary equivalent of a Marvel Comics universe. On the Penguin Random House site, you'll find a print and audio excerpt as well as a reading group guide if you're interested in taking this to your book club.
Well.
Okay, when we were coming up with topics for today, Jess and I realized we had a lot of books that don't quite fit neatly into one topic area, and that's where we came up with genre benders. So a lot of these are, part mystery, part fantasy, crossing a few different lines. The first one here is Magic for Liars. This is one of the first books I read myself during quarantine, and I loved it, and I already feel like I need to go back and reread it to catch all the clues that I missed. It's a fantasy noir mashup, complete with a flawed detective as the protagonist. By now, Ivy gambles used to being ordinary, especially compared to her identical twin sister, Tabitha, who is a magic prodigy. Ivy never really wanted to be magic, but she still wonders sometimes if it wouldn't have made some things easier. Tabitha's able to get rid of freckles that plague both of them. Her eyes sparkle a bit more, and everything seems to come much more easily than for Ivy, who is struggling as a private investigator, just barely getting by in an empty apartment and with a slight drinking problem. People never stick to Ivy, and she wonders if she'd been magic, if that might have been different. When she's hired to investigate a grisly murder at the school where Tabitha teaches theoretical magic, Ivy thinks this could be her chance to make good as an investigator, and it could change everything. But being around so much magic with so many what-ifs is intoxicating, and Ivy will have to keep her head clear if she wants to see the truth of this case. Gailey does a lot of fun stuff with novellas, with very interesting world building. This is their first novel, and it's really excellent, and I can't wait to see more from this author. And then
Gailey is one of my favorite authors. Just interjecting, sorry, quick here. They're one of my favorite authors, and Upright Women Wanted is about librarians in the resistance in like a Western setting. So that one's also a weird genre mix-up. So fun. Yeah, I am so excited every time they come out with something new.
There's a lot of great stuff, and I can also vouch for this one and Upright Women Wanted on audio if you are more of an audio reader as well. And then moving on to the next title is The Designers by Libba Bray. This is the start of the series, but I'm happy to report that the final book came out this year, so when you pick it up, you won't have to wait at all, except maybe for some library holes to come through. This is another one set in the 1920s, and this time in New York City. So it's a really great window into the past. And again, exploring a lot of parallels to the world we're living in right now, combined with some fantasy elements and some really excellent and thorough researching that Bray has done to bring her world to life. The story starts with Evie O'Neill, who is absolutely thrilled when she's forced to leave her small town in disgrace and head to New York City. But new friends, dashing pickpockets, and giggle water aren't enough to distract Evie from the strange things that are happening in the city, including grisly murders that seem to have ties to the occult. When Evie's uncle is asked to serve as a consultant, Evie thinks she might have a way to help catch the killer, if the killer doesn't find her first. Strange times are coming to New York City and the country, a time when the natural order of things is threatened, and people like Evie with special talents might be able to help. Evie's ready to investigate these murders, but the question becomes, what if the murders are just the beginning? And this is a really intense read with some horror and some really spooky moments, but it is so exciting and such a great start to a series. I think it'll really draw you in if you pick it up.
I have to just quickly tell my Live a Bray story because it happened at Brooklyn Public Library. I had just finished a Great and Terrible Beauty, and I loved it so much that I was telling everyone that would listen about how enjoyable it was. And I was at a fundraiser at the Brooklyn Public Library, and I turned to the person sitting next to me and started raving about it. And it turned out to be Libba Bray. I had no idea.
Amazing.
Like, I finished this book, it's so great. And her editor was sitting next to her, and she got this weird look on her face, like, I couldn't have planned this better if I tried. I haven't read this yet, but you sold me on this one. I'm definitely going to pick it up.
She's an author who I feel like you can really see her improving with every book, so this one will not disappoint.
Great.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was waiting for the fourth one to come out. So now that it is, I'm excited to pick this one up. So for my first genre bender, I chose This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. And this book clocks in at a slim 200 pages, but it is quite the gut punch. It's part science fiction, part fantasy, part a kind of utopian thought experiment, part an epistolary novel, part a time travel novel, and part a queer love story. So you've got literally a little bit of everything, at least everything that I love, all packed into these 200 pages. The premise of this is that there are two characters, one named Red, one named Blue. They are at war. They both come from different timelines, and they're at war trying to ensure that their timeline is the one that kind of wins out, and it's the future that they're trying to build in the world. And it's an enemies to lovers story. They're at war. They're, doing these. This is a little hard to explain, but they're at war, kind of gradually falling in love through these letters that they're leaving for each other, and finding. It's such an imaginative, beautiful world building that these two authors do. They also wrote this book by actually mailing each other the letters and writing in response to each other, which is such an interesting little tidbit when you read it. If you like audiobooks, I cannot recommend the audio of this highly enough. The narrators do a phenomenal job of really capturing the sensuality of the language that these two authors are using. It's really quite stunning to listen to them kind of bring these words to life. Amal is a poet, so you can really hear that in the section she wrote especially. So it reads like poetry, but it's disguised as prose. And I like to sell it as saying that it's disguised as science fiction and fantasy, but it's actually just a little bit of truth all wrapped up in this novella. So this is, it's one you can easily read in one sitting, and it's a lot of fun.
It's definitely moving up higher on my to-read list.
Yeah. I love letter writing.
Excellent. All right. And then the other one is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is her memoir about being in an abusive relationship and the kind of fallout that followed her through her life through this relationship. It is. I knew it immediately that this would fit into genre benders because it's part it is part memoir, but it also she uses all of these tropes of the Gothic and of haunted house stories. She focuses on this house that she and her partner were living in at the time. Well, her partner owned, I guess, and she was spending time there, and they ended up living together for a while. And she focuses on this as kind of a haunted domestic horror story. She weaves in elements of essay, elements of critical and queer theory. She has all these layers of references built in to each section of the book, and each of these references, from Disney villains to pop culture to queer theorists, she uses as a way to analyze this relationship and kind of think through what it meant and what it did to her. Again, this was one that I did read in a single sitting and immediately wanted to go back. I haven't reread it yet, but in preparing for this, I thought, yeah, maybe it's time. Because I think it's one that's going to reward multiple readings just with the layers of complexity there. There are trigger warnings for abuse and assault in it, so if that is something you're sensitive to, please be aware of that in this one. But it just hit me right here where all my feelings are. So that's In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado.
Wow, that cover itself makes you just want to go into that, learn more about that house. That's crazy. The next one from me is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And this was I think my second quarantine read. And I did not know what to expect, but when you describe a book, when they're pitching a book called Steel Magnolias meets Dracula, how can you not want to pick it up? And that is actually exactly what it is. So it's set in the 90s horror novel about a woman's book club that must do battle with a mysterious newcomer to their small southern town. It's perfect for fans of Stephen King, but at the same time, there's so much of like the women's relationships that you find yourself crying on one page, or like really relating to these women and their marriages and what it's like to be a mother, and then being absolutely terrified on the next page. So it's quite a trip, and it takes a lot out of you, let's say. But it's really fun. Patricia, but also don't read it at night if you're home by yourself, maybe, because it really is scary. But Patricia Campbell's life has never felt smaller. Her husband is a workaholic, her teenage kids have their own lives, and her senile mother-in-law needs constant care. And of course, she's always one step behind on her endless to-do list, like everybody else. But there is a difference in her life. The only thing keeping her sane is her book club, her close-knit group of Charleston women united by their love of true crime. At these meetings, they're as likely to talk about the Manson family as their own. But one evening after book club, Patricia is viciously attacked by an elderly neighbor, bringing the neighbor's handsome nephew, James Harris, into her life. James is well-traveled and well-read, and he makes Patricia feel things she hasn't felt in years. But when children on the other side of town go missing, their deaths written off by the local police, Patricia has a reason to believe that James Harris is more of a Bundy than a Brad Pitt. The real problem, James is a monster of a different kind, but Patricia has already invited him in. Little by little, James will insinuate himself into the community and try to take over everything that everybody took for granted, including the book club. But she won't surrender without a fight in this literally blood-soaked tale of neighborly kindness gone wrong. I can't recommend this one enough. And I absolutely love Grady Hendrix, so it makes it more fun.
I'm excited to get to this one. What was the next one? Just this fall. It was so.
Yeah, he does not disappoint. And he promises to scare you, and he does. Jen Childs, when you talk about your next one, oh, there you go. I was going to say you're on mute.
Yeah. I'm always thrilled when a new David Mitchell is publishing. I'm talking about Utopia Avenue, which technically is not published until next month. But this is kind of a heads up that there's a new one coming. This is a long-awaited new novel from the best-selling prize-winning author of Cloud Atlas and The Bone Clocks. David Mitchell is always a genre bender for sure. Utopia Avenue is the strangest British band that you've never heard of. Emerging from London's psychedelic scene in 1967, Utopia Avenue embarked on a meteoric journey from the seedy clubs of Soho, a TV debut on Top of the Pops, the cusp of chart success, glory in Amsterdam, prison in Rome, and a fateful American sojourn in the Chelsea Hotel, Laurel Canyon, and San Francisco during the autumn of '68. Here in Mitchell's kaleidoscope novel, we're told the unexpurgated story of Utopia Avenue's turbulent life and times, of fame's Faustian pact and stardom's wobbly ladder, of the families we choose and the ones we don't, of voices in the head and the truths and lies they whisper, of music, madness, and idealism. Can we really change the world, or does the world change us? You'll find print and audio excerpts on penguinrandomhouse.com if you don't want to wait for the book to come out. And Emma and Justin correct me, but I believe you can place holds on the e and audio in advance, despite the fact that it's not out. But.
Yes, as soon as it's on order, it'll show up in our catalogs and be reservable. And with in-demand authors like David Mitchell, we usually do or try to order those ahead of time.
Great. So get on the list.
Okay, so our last theme, the last theme we picked here today, your family book club. I know from our reading books, and they're really great for this kind of thing, but we wanted to highlight some other ones that we that are ones that read literature and also have a lot of appeal for you as an adult, or even for, you know, if you have teenagers and younger kids together. These are really books that we thought would appeal to everybody across the board. So the first one that I have today is Furthermore by Tahira Mafi. And this one is, the main character's name is Alice, and she lives in a world of colorful and shocking magic, but she does not, you can see in the picture here, she herself is not as colorful as the world around her. And she struggles to find magic when other people manage to find it more easily. She travels to the world in order to find her father, who has disappeared. And as she does so, she's going to have to find herself as she goes along. Sorry, my cat is getting up to mischief over there. See him.
It's not a party till a pet gets involved, right?
Right? Somebody.
Exactly.
So this is in the furthermore is in the spirit of books like Alice in Wonderland, with a lot of nonsense in the world building. So it's a lot of fun. It's silly. It's built on friendship. All the characters in the book really have these beautiful friendships and really support each other. It would be great. I read it for the first time last year, and I loved it. So I know that it appeals to adults, but I think it would also appeal to kids, you know, from like the Harry Potter, Rick Riordan, all the way up. It's Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz and that kind of fun, adventure, silly kind of. So I think it's all the way up to and then the other one is Akata Witch by Nandini Okorafor. This one, like the protagonists of both of these stories are 12, so that's a good way to kind of gauge maybe where interest is for kids. So the main character in Akata Witch is named Sunny. She grew up in New York City, but has moved to West Africa, and she is albino. And she discovers that she has magical powers. She didn't understand where she fit in or some of the things that were happening around her, but then this group of schoolmates kind of pulls her to the side and starts teaching her about her power and what she can do. And then they kind of come together. Again, it's a kind of found family, which is really, great. It's built on these really beautiful friendships. And Okorafor weaves in Nigerian mythology and history into the magic and the world building. So again, if your kids are interested in Harry Potter and that kind of fantasy, this is another pulling in another culture into a fantasy world, and it's really interesting. I learned a lot reading it about the Nigerian mythology, but it also is just a lot of fun. And Sunny she's one of those characters that you're just rooting for. You're with her the whole way. So that's Akata Witch by Nandini Okorafor.
And also for Akata Witch, if you're interested in reading that, it's always available as an audiobook from the library catalog, so you can grab that right now.
And there's a sequel. It's 2 books, and the sequel is also out as well. I don't know if that's always available or not, but I know it is.
Not always, but it is there. So again, ready to go. Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend is one of my favorites. I know it's one of Jess's favorites too. The story follows Morgan Crow, who is cursed and doomed to die before her 11th birthday on Eventide night. In her town, she is blamed for every mishap, every single thing that goes wrong. Her family wants nothing to do with her, and she definitely has earned a reputation as the girl who is cursed. When Eventide arrives early, Morgan is faced with the prospect of her premature death until a strange man named Jupiter North arrives. Jupiter has bright red hair, a big bushy beard, and a very loud manner, and he says that he is there to help Morgan. And if, as you're reading, he sounds a bit like Doctor Who, that is not a coincidence. He was partly inspired by those characters. With Jupiter's help, Morgan is able to travel to Nevermore, where she has the chance to compete in a series of trials for a place in Nevermore's most revered group, the Wondrous Society. If she makes it in, she'll also earn her place with a home and family who actually care about her, something she's never had before. But before she does that, Morgan will have to complete the dreaded talent trial when she is quite sure there's nothing extraordinary about her. Morgan will have to step boldly and learn to trust her new friends if she hopes to pass the trials and join the Wondrous Society. This is a really delightful story. It's very fast-paced with a really well-developed world. The second book is out, and the third book is coming. It is a planned 6-book series, and I can also vouch for these on audio. They are excellent. For something slightly different, we also have Lockwood & Co., The Screaming Staircase. This is the first book in a completed series by Jonathan Stroud. It's set in a modern London where people are dealing with what they call the problem. The problem in question is ghosts who have surfaced and create all sorts of mischief in town. Lucy Carlisle has been working for psychic investigation agencies since she was 8 years old. Like many children born after the problem, her psychic abilities are highly valued in the fight against ghosts and making sure that they don't cause harm to any humans. Unlike most agencies, Lockwood & Co. doesn't employ adults who can no longer see ghosts as supervisors. Instead, the agency is run jointly by its operatives, Anthony Lockwood, George Cubbins, and, often much to her own surprise, Lucy herself. Unfortunately, being a small agency with no clout to speak of compared to the larger agencies in town, Lockwood & Co. has difficulties both with finding and keeping clients. After a particularly disastrous case, the company is faced with the imminent failure of their fledgling agency, unless they accept a case clearing one of the most haunted houses in London of its malevolent spirit. In the words of Anthony Lockwood himself, what could possibly go wrong? This is a little bit mystery, a little bit scary, and quite funny with some really great humor from all of the characters.
It's always fun to add to our reading piles. So those were all fun, my gosh. The last book I'm going to talk about today is from George Takei, and They Called Us Enemy. And this is a great book for a family book club because not only is it beautifully illustrated and incredibly well written, but it's also a story of history that you can share with your family and you can teach your kids about something that happened in the past in an accessible way. And this is a stunning graphic memoir recounting author-activist George Takei's childhood imprisoned within American concentration camps during World War II. The experience that forces and shapes the American icon and America itself. It's a gripping tale of courage, country, loyalty, and love. We all know George Takei from his starring in one of everyone's favorite shows, Star Trek, but a lot of you might not know his backstory. He woke up as a 4-year-old boy to find his own birth country at war with his father's. And his entire family was forced from their home into an uncertain future. In 1942, every person of Japanese descent on the West Coast was rounded up and shipped to one of 10 relocation centers, hundreds or thousands of miles from their homes, where he would be held for years under armed guard. This is Takei's first-hand account of those years behind barbed wire, the joys and terrors of growing up under legalized racism, his mother's hard choices, his father's faith in democracy, and the way those experiences planted the seeds for his astonishing future. What does it mean to be American? Who gets to decide? When the world is against you, what can one person do? To answer these questions, Takei joins with co-writers Justin Eisinger and Stephen Scott and artist Harmony Becker for the journey of a lifetime. And as you can see, the themes in this book are so relevant to today, and will start a great discussion for your family book club.
And I have to say, this is a house favorite among BPL librarians. We have been recommending it a lot since it first came out, so it's been really great.
Great.
Then we can't do a Brooklyn presentation without Jacqueline Woodson, Brooklyn author extraordinaire. And it was hard to pick a title to present because she has so many great ones, from Brown Girl Dreaming to Red at the Bone. But I'm going to talk about Harbor Me. This is Woodson's middle grade novel, which celebrates the healing that can occur when a group of students share their stories. It all starts when 6 kids have to meet for a weekly chat by themselves, no adults to listen in. They're in that room, which they soon dubbed the ARTT room, short for a room to talk. They discover it's safe to talk about what's bothering them. Everything from Esteban's father's deportation and Haley's father's incarceration to Amari's fears of racial profiling and Ashton's adjustment to his changing family fortunes. When the 6 are together, they can express the feelings and fears they have to hide from the rest of the world, and together they can grow braver and more ready for the rest of their lives. A Booklist starred review said, "The magic is in the writing. Woodson tells stories torn from headlines, but personalizes them with poetry and memories, blunting their trauma with understanding and love. Haley's history weaves in and out, drawing readers close. These children become each other's safe harbors, and Woodson brilliantly shows readers how to find the connections we all need." This is a great book to start family discussions and something of interest for all readers. On the Penguin Random House website, you'll find a print and audio excerpt for you to preview, as well as a teacher's guide.
Oh, sorry, I'm listening. I'm getting distracted. Whoop, here we go.
Great. Thanks so much for coming. I know Emma wanted to remind you all about the great Brooklyn Public Library resources.
Right, and if you want even more recommendations, if your to-read list isn't overflowing from watching this episode, be sure to head over to the library website, bklynlibrary.org/bookmatch, to get your own personalized reading list. A lot of librarians are enjoying having the chance to do BookMatch while working from home, and we're really excited to share recommendations right now, even if we can't do it in person.
Great. Thank you, guys. That was fun, and I wrote down so many notes about what I want to read, so I'm busy for the next couple months.
And a reminder, we'll be sending out a follow-up, which will include the link to the archive. Please do share with your friends, and we hope you enjoyed this afternoon's Reader's Advisory.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye. This is
Hi,
Babe.
thanks for having
Babe.
us. It was so fun.